Welcome to Crazy Good Turns. Our goal is to celebrate people who do good deeds, big or small. We discover our stories through research and with help from you, our listeners. Visit our website at crazygoodturns.org/celebrate to tell us about a person or organization who's done something great for someone else. And they could be featured on an upcoming episode. In fact, today's episode was submitted to us by Katie Keogh Widener, a listener in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania. Many thanks, Katie, and we'll send you some Crazy Good Turn swag in appreciation. As always, thanks for listening.
I think some of the greatest innovators in history, even though back when they were doing these things, they didn't have a diagnosis for autism or some of these other developmental disabilities, I'll bet whatever money's in my wallet that a number of them are on the spectrum.
That's Ernie Dianastasis, giving his perspective on the unique gifts that people on the autism scale bring to the world. And he should know. For a number of years, he ran one of the largest and most successful technology companies in Delaware, where he hired more than 40 people with autism. Unfortunately, he's the exception, not the rule. There are 30 million people on the spectrum in the U.S. alone. They face unique challenges. Nearly half of young adults with autism are unemployed. And while that's a sad commentary on many levels, it's also a big missed opportunity, because people with autism also have incredible talents. Perhaps no one knows this better than Ernie. Seeing the power and impact of hiring people on the spectrum, in 2016 he sold his stake in the company he helped start and used the money to launch an entirely new business. It's called The Precisionists, and they have an ambitious goal: to employ 10,000 people on the autism scale. This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell inspiring stories about people who do amazing things for others, and I'm your host, Brad Shaw. In this episode, we're going to talk about seeing the world differently, in ways that can be a real struggle for some, but also in ways that can be a catalyst for positive change.
I didn't learn I had autism until I was 26 years old. And in retrospect, it describes so much about my past, why I was bullied growing up and why I never wanted to go over to friends' houses, why I always wanted to just play outside and see what was under the rocks instead of playing football.
Michael Statt, now 36, grew up in Chadds Pennsylvania, the oldest of two siblings. His dad, Richard, said that Michael's stellar academic performance likely overshadowed some of the social issues he was having. Here's Richard.
He did extremely well academically from the beginning. I mean, what do elementary school parents do? What's their window into their child other than when the child is at home? It's the periodic discussions with teachers, and they were always glowing. Michael was a model student, and in some cases we would hear from longtime teachers that he was the best they had ever taught in one subject or another. So we were getting positive reinforcement academically, but Michael was not engaged on a traditional social relationships with the other kids.
Richard and his wife Linda were certainly attuned to Michael's social anxieties, but they chalked it up to shyness. Richard said he'd been shy as a kid too, so he figured Michael would eventually outgrow it just as he had. In the meantime, Michael kept killing it in school.
Despite the many issues I had socially in school, all the way through the end of high school, the structure that high school provided was what allowed me to really thrive academically, which made me a straight-A student and allowed me to get into Stanford.
Michael got along well at Stanford. He continued to thrive academically and graduated with a degree in English and a minor in philosophy. But graduation marked a turn in Michael's life, and not a good one. Without the structure of school, he lost his way.
After college, it was my first time really just having to kind of advocate for myself. Things started to kind of go downwards in terms of kind of the track that my life was on. I was thrown out into the world and didn't really have the tool set to know how to, A, find a job. I mean, I knew the basics of write a cover letter, try to get interviews. But there were a lot of the social parts I didn't know. Even if I would read about things like body language or tone of voice or how to network, whenever I tried those things, people just, generally speaking, didn't respond to them in a positive way. Or they might have pretended to at the time, but they didn't respond to my job applications.
Unfortunately, Michael's experience is a common one. People on the spectrum don't always follow the same social norms that govern most workplaces. For example, Michael says he struggles with eye contact. That'd be a red flag in a typical job interview. But that brings us back to Ernie D'Anastasis, who sees things differently.
At the end of the day, how someone shakes your hand or whether they look you in the eye or not has no bearing in terms of whether they're going to be strong performers in a technical job.
Ernie grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, among a community of other Greek Americans. His dad was something of a serial entrepreneur, starting a real estate business, a construction company, and a private swimming pool with over 600 members. He even produced a rock band that had a handful of singles in the 60s. Ernie says his close-knit family and a challenge they struggled with gave him perspective that he carries to this day.
One of the things that I think had a big impact on me and our entire family growing up was my youngest brother has, I'll call, a strong case of OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder. It had an impact on all of us, especially him, but we all grew up and for many years didn't know what he was dealing with, what he was struggling with, both in school and socially. But as he learned what it was and it was properly diagnosed, we all kind of learned together as a family and worked with him and supported him. And today he's working and he's in Lancaster working. He's doing very well.
Ernie graduated from Lehigh University in 1978, a finance and marketing double major. He spent another year there getting his MBA and landed his first job at IBM. After a few years, some of his colleagues left to start an IT services company called Computer Aid Inc., or CAI. Ernie, bitten by the entrepreneur bug he inherited from his dad, jumped ship at IBM and joined CAI as one of its first employees. Ernie succeeded wildly at CAI, climbing the ranks into leadership and helping it become one of the largest technology companies in Delaware, with nearly 1,500 employees. Then, in 2012, he got a phone call that changed his life.
Delaware being a small place and where I had my operation based, you get to know everybody. And so one day I got a call about 5 years ago from Governor Jack Markell, and he was at the time still in his first term as governor. It's not meant to sound like bragging because Delaware's so small. One night you can run into him in the grocery store, and the next day you're in a board meeting and the governor's there. So it's one of the things I think that makes it a special place. He called me and he said that he had just become head of the National Governors Association, the NGA. And it's actually a real honor because you're picked by the other 49 governors to do this. And the only perk you really get out of it is, besides the honor, is you get to pick a platform that all 50 governors work from. And Governor Markell chose employing people with disabilities.
Finding and keeping a steady job has long been a challenge for people with disabilities. That's even more true among those on the spectrum. Since the mid-1970s, we've seen a massive shift of jobs away from manufacturing and toward the service sector. Jobs that put a premium on social interaction. In other words, precisely the kind of job that someone with autism could find hard to do. But the governor knew that many IT jobs often don't have those same requirements. So he enlisted Ernie's help in hiring people on the spectrum.
He had been talking to a guy that he read about in a New York Times online article that was from Denmark, and his name is Torkild Sanna. And this guy that he read about had come up with some innovative approaches to finding, assessing, training, and employing people on the autism spectrum into technology jobs. And he did it with the primary motivator being his son Lars, who at the time was diagnosed at the age of 3, 10 years ago, on the autism spectrum. And Torkild, like a lot of parents, said, I really want to figure out what can I do so that when Lars grows up, he can have a meaningful opportunity in life. What I decided to do was jump on a plane and go over to Copenhagen and see it, because I had to see it and really validate all the things he was talking about and get an understanding of it. But really what he had done that was really exciting was come up with some innovative approaches around finding the candidates, bringing them in to talk about opportunities, and also be able to assess the capability of these candidates in a fashion that would not normally work in most companies through an HR-driven interview.
That's cool. So, Ernie, what were some of the innovative things they were doing that caught your attention?
Well, one of the innovative things I think is Lego Mindstorms. And what I mean by that, a way to bypass that interview process, you still have to assess someone's capability. And as he would bring candidates in that were looking for job opportunities, instead of the interview, each person would get a project to do with a Lego Mindstorm. Now, a Mindstorm is different than just the Lego toys that we all grew up playing with. A Lego Mindstorm is a programmable robot, and it has like a battery pack, and it's probably a little bigger than a pack of cigarettes, the pack itself. And then it has sensors and adapters, and you plug in the Lego building blocks around it, and then you program it. And the robot moves around on a table. It can pick things up. It can come to the edge of the table, back up. It's a very sophisticated toy. And by giving each person a project to do, you can get a very good feel in terms of potentially capability as to whether someone would be well suited to developing software or testing software, or whether they would need to do easier functions, perhaps like scanning documents or doing data entry. It varies just based on capability and what level of functioning that individual has.
So do you all still employ that Lego Mindstorm approach?
Absolutely. It's a terrific way and it's also a great icebreaker when candidates are coming in. It's a very non-threatening, great way to just develop rapport and have people feel comfortable coming into a corporate environment. And instead of sitting down and doing a tense interview, it's, hey, here's a Lego project, and we bring in pizza or popcorn and just make it a very comfortable and fun thing to do.
That's awesome. So you ended up saying yes to the governor, and then what happened next after you visited Denmark?
When I was over there, it validated the model for me. Then Torkill and his wife and son moved to the U.S., and this was an important piece of the equation. Torkill's goal is to enable 1 million jobs around the world for people on the autism spectrum. And with a country being only 5+ million people, as wonderful as Denmark is, he knew he couldn't reach that goal without going to a much bigger market. So he moved to Delaware, and I invited him in to start working with us, and I basically started a pilot project. And within a year to a year and a half, we had created over 40 jobs for people on the spectrum into technology projects. That's when it hit me as I was doing that, and we saw the success that these individuals had. This was the best part of the whole story. The performance was just fantastic. And the attention to detail, the accuracy, the ability to do a really good job, all those attributes that we thought would apply, they absolutely did. And that's when it really hit me that this is what I wanted to really, instead of it just being a side project that represented just a small part of the company where I was at CAI, I really wanted to go and cash out of my stake there, use the proceeds to self-fund a brand new company that would be 100% focused on doing this, and with a goal of creating 10,000 jobs for people with disabilities by the year 2025.
And that's how the Precisionists Incorporated, or TPI, was founded. We'll hear more about how they operate and what their plans are, but it's worth pausing here and returning to Michael's journey. As we've learned in prior Crazy Good Turns episodes, a job can be so much more than a paycheck for people who struggle in life. Whether it's the homeless, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or victims of sex trafficking, having a stable, fulfilling job can provide the purpose, identity, and independence needed to succeed in life. But in Michael's experience, having a steady job only added to his anxiety. He just couldn't fit in.
One place I worked for, I'd say about six months straight, back when I was around 26, so about 10 years ago. At that place, it was the same job or the same thing every day, but that wasn't even the issue. The issue was the people there. And they're probably great people, but it just so happened that they were interested in baseball and football, but mainly baseball. And I was interested in baseball to some extent, but I just didn't go play softball after work. They all did. One thing about people on the spectrum is a lot of us have to have time to decompress after like a workday or a social situation. So at the end of the workday, I know it's perfectly fine, and I think it's great for a lot of neurotypicals want to go and socialize more right away after the workday. Because I didn't socialize right away, I was like, people thought I didn't like them. And I even said, it doesn't mean anything. I think you guys are cool. But still, that combined with probably just the facial expressions I was making or the way I walk, people have said, like, I walk on my toes, probably, who knows, the way I was dressing, or I have no idea. They just didn't like me. A couple people in particular started to kind of bully me bully me in the workplace verbally. Like, whenever I'd try to fit in or try to make a joke, they would say, oh, that sounds stupid, or just try to belittle me in various ways. And I was definitely, I think, doing the job just about perfectly in terms of what the job itself entailed. But yeah, that was just, and then when I went to the boss, tried to explain this, didn't get any support there either.
Things only got worse for Michael. He bounced around various jobs, then moved to California to launch a website. He began to suffer from chronic head pain that required medication and surgery to fix. Then his mom experienced a health emergency, so he moved back in with his parents. His social isolation only worsened.
I'd been living with my parents for about 3 years, and since I started, especially in the last year of those 3, I was very depressed. I hadn't socialized or gone out with any kinds of friends in about a year or more. It felt like I was losing my social skills. I was so shy and anxious, I could barely go out to the grocery store. So I would just stay in my bedroom for days at a time and just use any excuse. If my family had guests over, like our cousins came to visit one day, I'd just stay in my bedroom. I just couldn't stand it.
But things were about to get better for Michael. Much better. Michael's dad, Richard, happened to read an article about Ernie and the Precisionists. In a stroke of luck, Richard then happened to attend a meeting where the governor highlighted Ernie's work.
It was so fortuitous because 4 days earlier I had remembered the newspaper article and I had sent an inquiry into TPI. I didn't know the staff people, but I just sent an inquiry into one of the senior managers, Kendall Reynolds, and then the governor spoke of it, and I then shared it all with Michael, and then Michael said, absolutely, I'm very interested. And we participated in the information session in February, and Michael participated in the 4-week assessment program. But I want to add a little texture to all of that because it sounds like, oh, step A, step B, step C, and in hindsight it all seems so logical and simple. But for someone like Michael, and I don't know whether this is true, but I suspect it is, of his colleagues, after months or years of isolation, of rejection, of difficulty, it would be hard for most people to appreciate the magnitude of the effort to leave that isolated environment and attend an information session, or to leave that isolated environment, the protective environment of being alone in your room. And by the way, one of the things I read about Asperger's was that it goes away when you go into your bedroom and close the door behind you because you're there by yourself. But the courage of Michael and his coworkers to engage and to participate in TPI, to take that step and to take that risk after so many of their prior efforts had been rejected in a painful way. Their courage is amazing, and the embrace and the support that they found is just spectacular.
Michael was hired by the Precisionist as a data analyst working primarily on cleaning up databases for TPI's clients. He loves the work and his colleagues, and he says it has completely turned his life around.
At the Precisionists, just from the very beginning, everyone else there so far everybody's been on the autism spectrum. And you know what they say about people with autism. if you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum. So, like everybody there is different and has their own foibles, their own idiosyncrasies. And what's wonderful is everybody is tolerant and welcoming of everybody's foibles and idiosyncrasies instead of using those differences to try to put other people down. One thing that's happened is it just put me back into the social sphere in a structured way. So my confidence in that regard has gone up a lot. Financially, it's provided me the ability to move out and rent my own apartment. So as of a few weeks ago, I'm now living in Wilmington, pretty close to the TPI offices. And then I've also grown to know and love everybody on the team. Everyone, the staff and my coworkers are kind of like a family, and everyone says that. And yeah, some of us do things outside of work. We go see movies. We hang out at each other's places maybe a little for an hour or two afterwards. And this is something that I hadn't done in years. Everything is so exciting now. And it's so exciting to be a part of a company like this that's a startup, and it's filling this void, I think, that's existed in this country and probably the world.
The Precisionist is run by a small team. Right now, it's Ernie and a handful of other managers overseeing 30 employees. The people they hire are essentially contract employees assigned to work on projects for TPI's clients. They get stationed either inside the client company's offices or within one of TPI's 2 innovation and technology centers in Wilmington and Nashville. They're still in startup mode, but are opening 2 more technology centers in the coming months. Their growing client list includes some impressive names, including Pfizer and UBS. And Ernie says his clients clearly see the value his employees bring to their IT projects.
The companies we work with have told us that it's actually raised the game, the level of performance across the organization. Because one of the things that's most important about this entire story, Brad, is that these individuals perform phenomenally. And that's really important. There is absolutely no charity in this initiative. It would not hold up if it was a charitable activity. This is all about performance. And so companies tell us that it actually improves performance across the company.
I asked Michael what about being on the autism spectrum makes him so great at his job.
I would say a few things. I'd say, A, I can get hyper-focused on one task. Even if I have multiple jobs throughout the day, for those 2 hours that I'm working on Project A, my brain zooms in on it, hones in on it like a laser, and I have no problems with getting distracted from it. I'd say secondly, I think a lot of people on the spectrum think about things from different angles than people that are neurotypical. It might be something as small as, for example, a coworker of mine knew a certain keyboard shortcut, and that saves a few seconds for a part of a project. Somebody else is a great artist, and she was able to incorporate her art skills in kind of an unexpected way, which helps the project.
So the Precisionist is delivering the classic win-win. Exceptional results for its clients and a work environment that is literally changing its employees' lives. A happy fact not lost on Michael's dad after decades of watching his son struggle.
A network of friends is something 6 months ago, 10 months ago, we could have only imagined in a fantasy dream. There's opportunity and hope. It's a fresh, new feeling. It's wonderful. It really is. I have lived it, and I am so proud of him. I still have tears in my eyes, actually, listening to him have the voice and the confidence to speak about his experiences the way he just did. I'm just happily amazed.
We said this episode is about seeing the world differently, and that's what people on the spectrum do, as Michael pointed out. Sure, that can create obstacles and struggles in life and heighten our own misconceptions. But people with autism have amazing gifts and talents to offer, precisely because they see the world differently. In the course of my conversation with Richard, he mentioned a website called wrongplanet.net, which is a huge online discussion forum for people on the spectrum. Its name is a nod to the feeling that many with autism have, that they're not of this world. In fact, that was the opening sentiment of Michael's college admissions essay that got him into Stanford. When you spend time on Wrong Planet, you actually come away realizing there really isn't a right or wrong planet, just different ones. And if we can accept those differences, we'd all be better off.
If everybody that's listening can embrace this amazing diversity of talent that's in all people with kindness and with thoughtfulness, as Ernie and his team and TPI have done, then the world will be a better place and we will all have made an important difference.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about the Precisionists and to see some great photos of Ernie and his team. You can also submit your ideas for people or organizations we should feature, and stay connected with us between episodes by following us on Facebook and Twitter. Our show is audio engineered by Stephen Key. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. A special thanks to Megan Basinger, and I'm your host, Brad Shaw.
Well, if you have everyone thinking the same or acting the same or being part of the same social clubs or doing all the same things, you don't tend to get fresh thinking and innovative thinking like you do when you have outliers and people coming at things from totally different perspective or totally different lens that they're looking through.